So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really delighted with tonight's interview, and it's with a huge pleasure to welcome one and only Martin Sharp. Um, our paths, Marek and I, crossed paths with Martin alongside through our journey with Professional Speakers Academy and back in November 2018. And I believe from day one, we felt that we can build a strong and very successful relationship. So, some few words about Martin for people who don't know him yet. And I'm pretty sure after this, you'll be as excited as I am. And as Mark and I, we are both excited to share our journey to grow, to develop ourselves, to develop our business, our strategies, and our performance abilities on stage and on a daily basis. Because the business relationship is not only, and probably you will agree with me, Martin, it's not only just on the business. You basically will reflect your daily living. However, Martin is award-winning author, a phenomenal entrepreneur, and I have to say, as a speaker, he can blow your mind. I have also the opportunity to work very close to Martin as a business strategist, and every single business, every single person, entrepreneur, having that opportunity also to share that journey is probably one of the most luckiest one you can ever imagine. So, Martin, welcome.
Thank you very much. That's a very good introduction. I will certainly live up to it for you. Excellent.
Well, let's just begin because obviously we know very well, both of us, and I'm pretty sure the audience who would either join live or who would actually interact with this as a recording would like to know how important when you meet another person, another business, or when you get into somebody's life, let's just put it this way, is important to understand the quality of the communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And communication is crucial for everything. As social animals, which is what we are based in the way that we work, the way that we're going to improve ourselves, the way we improve our standing, and in fact, the way that we even got to the point where we could live purely on communication. And communication itself, if you had nobody else in the entire world, would you ever really need to communicate? Would you ever really build a language set? Would you ever build something? So the whole point of communication is so you can have this social interaction. And if we take it really far back and we go back to like caveman times, if you didn't communicate well, and if you didn't actually build that kind of social awareness and then the way of being able to work with other people, you were out of the cave. And that is a really scary and lonely place, because outside this cave, you've got all sorts of things going on. You've got saber-tooth tigers, you've got like bad berries, you've got all sorts of things that are really just there to kill you. Life in itself has got so many different hazards. So if you didn't build those great communication skills, you were really stuffed. And today's world, okay, we don't have saber-tooth tigers anymore, and we're pretty much warned about which ones are the poison berries. But we're still in a position where communication is really, really important, because those people that communicate well can get across an idea, get across that kind of essence of what needs to happen, can all of a sudden be in a position where they accelerate themselves forwards. Have you ever kind of noticed that actually those people that people like to follow, those motivational people, inspirational people, leaders, etc., are always great communicators, and usually the ones that are always rewarded quite well for it? Whereas when you look sometimes think, actually, you're not that good of a good communicator. Are you rewarded justly? Because you could have an absolutely amazing skill, but if nobody else knows about it, are you doing yourself an injustice?
Absolutely, wow. You've went back to really beginning of our existence, and one of the things I really believe when it comes to communication is, go back to actually your fundamentals, because sometimes we get lost in the speed of the life we have. We forget about the beginnings of our ones, and that one of the first reasons that we need to communicate is is to survive, isn't it?
Hmm.
And to exist. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And it is so crucial because if you think about everything we do on a daily basis now involves other people. You know, you wake up in the morning, if you've got a partner, you're saying good morning to that partner. If you've got family around you or children or anything, you've got to like interact with them in the morning. You know, who's going to get in the shower first? These are all the basic things that kind of happen, you know, and that's just as soon as you're conscious again first thing in the morning, let alone then starting to get into the more nitty gritty and then the harder pieces of like either being running a business or working in a business or whatever you're doing as a livelihood, where again communication kind of is king. You are in a position where you have to get your message across, to interact with other people, to work with other people, whether that's to do with being in the service sector, whether you're in a retail sector, whether you're in a production sector of some kind. There is some form of communication which kind of binds you to those people that are around you.
Wow. So looking at what you said, there are quite a few, let's just say, rules, but also steps when it comes to the communication, and one of them will be the perception. So quite often we start any kind of communication, any kind of first step of that by having that kind of a perception of what do we want out of that, and on and on and on. You know what, sort of what the other person should say, what they can say, if that makes sense. So how important is to make sure when you have some kind of perception to still keep it very open, not vague, in one direction, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And it was Einstein who said, you know, imagine. I'll get this right. Einstein that says, you know, logic will get you from A to B, but imagination takes you everywhere. And imagination is probably one of the greatest gifts that we have as a species, really. And everyone's got this ability to have an imagination, no matter what you believe your storytelling capability is, or what you believe your creativity capability is. You create things in your own way, you tell stories in your own way, you get your point across in your own way. So having this ability to envisage the possibilities, something that's not true, and make it true, is a phenomenal skill. So but you've got to be able to take hold of this skill and just learn to run with it, and then learn to just accept that that's what you've got, and enjoy the fact that you can create something out of absolute nothing. Has that kind of answered the question? I've got a feeling it was only answered half of it.
Yeah, well, no, absolutely, because obviously, even with the quote from Einstein, you already can take a lot out of that, because we all try to follow the logic. I think it's just the way we've been taught from the very beginnings. Follow your logic, follow your logic. And I think the imagination of being open, that every one of us will have different type of opinions, different way of approaching things. It comes from your heart, isn't it? When you really follow your passion. And no matter if it's a regular communication, or is it communication with your family, business partner, a customer, or anyone around yourself, if you really follow your passion, you're going to actually provide the message in the actually direct way, instead of sort of trying to find the approachable way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And so many people just won't let themselves go and use their imagination. It's a surprise to me how many business owners, when we start talking to them about certain aspects of the business, are really quite constrained by this whole point. Just even simple things, for example, imagine what a cash flow forecast is going to be, or what your profit forecasts are going to be. And so many people get so bogged down in calculus and in where they're going to get the figures from, etc., and all these kind of issues that build on top of this. And you kind of open up the possibility of saying, well, just make it up. Take your best possible guess. Work on your own experience, because the first time you do it, you could be wildly wrong. But at least you've got a start. You've kind of made something that takes you further forward. So the next time you do it, you'll be even better, because you've got the experience of doing it for the first time. And this kind of thing about using that ability to have creativity really opens up vast kind of exposure, especially in businesses. Another great example is when people are trying to change their business or do something new, and many people get stuck in. Have you ever heard of a thing called analysis paralysis, where they kind of get stuck just purely looking for all the answers and stuff? And the reality is, if you just say, okay, take your best guess, make an assumption. And I know you've been told for years, don't assume anything, it makes an ass out of you and me and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is, if you can make some educated guesses, you can take your best assumptions you've got there that kind of move you that one step forwards and then validate them afterwards. You know, you're already on the path, you're already moving forwards, and straight away, you become more motivated, you can start to see results, and you can start to test things. Because I love Einstein, he's got some fabulous quotes, hasn't he? But another great one of his is in theory and practice are the same, but in practice they're not. And the life is the same. You know, you come up with these great plans, these great ideas, but when you actually put them into practice and try and make them work, you then start to see the problems come up, the things that you didn't envisage, the things that you could never have imagined would happen. You know, having kids, for instance, I never ever thought I'd have to say the phrase, don't paint the dog. It's something you don't expect to ever have to do. But, you know, I have had to say it to my kids on at least twice, at two occasions. Both of my daughter, I admit. But, you know, these are the things in life, you kind of have to pick these things up and just run with them and just deal with that situation. You can't spend your life just planning all the time. You can't spend your life trying to get everything right before you've actually made that step and that commitment to go forwards. So again, this great use of your imagination to kind of see what the possibility is. Imagine what the answers might be, and then go away and test it and give it a try. You know, fail fast, fail often, fail quickly, fail cheaply. You know, just get out there and do something, because amidst all that failures is actually where your learning takes place. You know, and it's great to say you can, you know, the knowledgeable man learns from his mistakes, the wise man learns from mistakes of others, and the foolish man just keeps making the same mistakes. But the thing is, if you're going to go out there and make some mistakes, yes, learn from others, but, you know, still put your mark on it. Because whatever it is that you're putting forward and your imagination and what you're kind of taking out into the world, it's going to be fantastic because it's your gift.
Wow. Well, just for people who are just joining as well on the live, I'm interviewing Martin Sharp, who's basically talking to us about the power of communication and how important it is to understand the strategies, the certain paths of that. One of the most important skills we could ever adopt in our is the communication. So, you know what? It was so live, but so also like grounded, I would say, mentioning that you know, things like you can sort of expect from the live, but there's gonna be the things that happen that you would never ever even imagine that they can even happen. So we've spoke about the first step, which is the perception in the communication. So one of the other steps, so the second really step, is the expectations. We start any kind of communication from expecting things from others. And would you agree with me that if you're just continuously expecting, you've mentioned there about falling, you know, you can fail just by trying to act on your desired goal. But if you're continuously expecting, you're going to fall in some stage, and the only way of coming back will be to give something back.
Mm. Yeah, so you've got to be careful with kind of expectations. I mean, certainly set goals, set objectives, understand what outcomes are going to be, and certainly have those in what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, especially if you've got a business. If you're not setting goals, if you're not setting your objectives, if you're not then breaking it down into tasks and stuff, you just set yourself up for a fall because you're not really running things through. But when it comes down to communication, there is a thing where when you go into certain meetings, if you're going to go negotiations, or if you're going to go have something that's really important, then certainly rehearse what you're going to say. Understand what it is that you would like to do during that conversation. But when you actually sit there in front of the other person or in front of several people, be open, be responsive to what they're going to tell you, because you don't know what's on their agenda. You don't know what they're going to say. And communication is a two-way street. you've got the responsibility to make sure you can get your message across in a way that's clear, it's understandable, and it helps move the other party forwards. And you've also got the responsibility of listening to them. You know, these adages, they're awful, aren't they? Because, you know, everyone uses them all the time. They're so cliche, but they're cliche for a reason. You know, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. You know, you should be listening more than what you're speaking on, especially when you're having a conversation with somebody. And if you kind of learn that skill, and it's a real basic skill of actual active listening, then automatically you're going to benefit more, and the person you're working with is going to benefit more, because they're going to feel like you really do care, that you really are listening to what they're saying, and you're reacting in the right ways to that, because you're then picking up that information. And people love to talk about themselves. I mean, look at me, I'm on an interview with you, I'm loving talking about myself. And the whole point is they will practically tell you anything. And it's just a case of just being there and listening. And sometimes, in fact, I think it was, oh crumbs, was it Freud or one of the other psychologists? Anyway, whoever it was, said that actually there's a whole cathartic feeling actually of just being listened to, and you can actually move people's lives in just being spending that time with them. But coming back to the whole point of listening and really understanding what's being said, and coming with and opening yourself up to new experiences. So yes, set your expectations and your goals as to what you were having with the conversation, but then be willing to change, flexible to change them. And then when you're going through that process, just do those active listening techniques. So things such as, you know, repeat back certain things to them, paraphrasing items, come up with questions that are specific to what they've just said. Use that information that they've given to you several sentences down the line, and don't be planning what you're going to say while they're talking. Listen to what it is that they're saying.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most powerful things, because as you just said, the last sentence, if you keep planning what you want to say, you will never pick up the most important points of what is important to that person who was talking. Uh, one of the examples of how important and how that challenge, let's just call it, can reach to even the top people. And I believe you would know that story when, if you ever wonder why Tony Robbins will sort of put his lips all together when he's in the middle of going through the flow, it's just because he just wants to give a bit of a more energy, or different type of energy. And really, it's his way of saying, shut up, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about the perception, and yeah, I will fully agree to that. It's a lot of times, the expectations. So the expectations, to expect your goals to be achievable, but then go flexible with, what others can actually open up to, because you might go with one vision, but then there's another opportunity, and if you keep going with just your own, you might miss that beautiful opportunity. So the third step, I truly believe it's all about intention. So when you're facing another person, and you're obviously, it's going to be planning to be the right level of communication, is to have the intention to make sure that person is number one at that point. Would you agree with that?
It's an interesting one, is that, because a lot of that depends on what the outcome's going to be. What is it that you're going into that conversation for? I think for me, if you're going into the conversation to listen and to understand and to get a point across, then yeah, absolutely. I think you're serving in the right way, and your intention should be to serve. But there's a difference between serving and just being a walkover, and that's the one thing you probably don't want to be. So definitely going there with the intention that you're there to serve, and you're there to make a difference, but not necessarily in the case that they have the intention, because the person themselves may not. And then where would that leave you?
Martin, having so much experience with either small businesses, individuals, bigger businesses, being around so many different people on a daily basis, obviously sharing on the stage your beautiful, beautiful stuff, well, and powerful story and inspiration. Obviously, the transformation you're going through. What if you were meant to just to say to all the audience listening to this, the three elements that are causing the most fear when it comes to communication? What would they be? What are people scared of the most?
Okay. And I was in the same position, and in fact, in many cases, I always am, and I don't mind admitting that, because when you come from a place where you want to serve and you want to do the best, and you want to make sure there is success at the end of it, there can't be a success if you don't know failure. You can't know justice if you don't know injustice, and sometimes you need to be feeling that nervousness inside you to keep you alive, keep you awake, and keep you on that promise that you're there to make a big difference. So feeling nervous and having kind of the butterflies and all those kind of things going on inside you is perfectly fine. And you kind of just got to accept that and take that as being that's the baseline. And one of my mentors, he taught me to reframe it. And what he means by that is take that feeling and make it associated with something else. So I take that feeling of butterflies and nervousness and kind of that real tightness. Oh, crumbs, I don't want to fail. I want to make sure this is working perfectly, as being my preparedness, as in I'm ready. And as soon as I start to feel that, I'm thinking, yeah, I'm in the right space. I've got the right energy about me. I've got my intentions in the right direction. So don't worry about feeling nervous when you're in any kind of communications, whether that's one-to-one, whether that's into some kind of negotiation, whether that's into some sales scenario, whether that's even with your partner, or whether you're sending it in front of 1,000 people, 10,000 people, whatever. That nervousness is perfectly fine. Even when you're just on an interview on Facebook and you've only got a camera to look at and Norik's lovely face. So definitely, just don't worry about that. The other thing that a lot of people worry about is, what am I going to say? What happens if I say something wrong? What happens if someone catches me out about something? And again, the one thing that I try and help people with on that side of things is to say, just don't worry about it. No one knows what you're going to say next. It's not pre-scripted. So you don't have to have everything planned out perfectly. So just let yourself go with the flow. If you're sat down over dinner with friends and family, you wouldn't have pre-scripted what it was going to be. If you're down at the pub with your mates, you don't have a crib sheet. Yeah, I'm going to talk about football, weather. Actually, I do have a crib sheet for that. But you just don't do it, do you? You just go there. You naturally talk about whatever comes up, and you can almost guarantee it. If it's an English bloke you can be talking to, it will be football, it'll be weather, and it'll be women. It's simple. So again, just don't worry about what you're going to say. Nobody else knows what it's going to be. And okay, so you make a mistake or two. You might get your facts and figures the wrong way around. You might say pounds instead of euros or whatever else. You're human. Well done. Congratulations, you're part of the human race. You're not an automaton. And if someone's really going to have a go at you about that, you got to kind of ask yourself, is that really the kind of person that you want to interact with? Or even better, what problem are they having in their life, which means they have to nitpick that specific part of your speech or that specific part of your conversation?
Yeah.
And really kind of think and feel sorry for them, the fact that they're having to do that, because that's giving them some form of perverse pleasure. So I think that whole fear factor about what you're going to say is usually a big one. And then usually the other part is just like how you look is one of those things that people feel quite nervous about. And I've heard certainly from some ladies that I've coached that they'll never get in front of a camera or on stage or anything unless they've got like plastered with makeup. And I've heard guys say they can't go on stage because they're too fat, too thin, too muscular, too not muscular, too whatever. The reality is, just be yourself, be comfortable being yourself. And find out what that is. Find out really what that style is. So for me, for example, you'll never see me wear a tie. I think the only times I ever really wear a tie is if it's a real time you have to do it, like maybe a funeral or something. Other than that, I don't tend to do it. And one of the key reasons was I don't feel comfortable in it. It's not me. I'm not stuck up. I'm not some stuck up banker or something. Not all bankers are stuck up, by the way. I know some very nice bankers. But, this is just not me. And I feel very, very uncomfortable about it. And because I'm feeling uncomfortable, I will come across nervous and uncomfortable. Whereas this is how I am. I'm approachable. I can get things done. I am very much a rolly sleeves up kind of guy who will make things happen. So why should I try and pretend to be something else? The best thing I can ever be is the best me. And that's the best thing I can ever expect for anybody, is to be the best you could possibly be. So don't worry about everybody else. Don't worry about what you look like, what you feel like, all those kind of things. Just be the best you.
Absolutely. Well, we've mentioned quite a lot about communication in that external manner, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And in external, it's really 75% of your communication is really your physiology. 20% is a tone of your voice as we go into the stats, and the 5% are just the words, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't feel comfortable, then your physiology will show that, because you're automatically going to put yourself into the position of discomfort. So your tone will break down as well. Do you think, just before we go to the next question, do you think are those three stages, so your physiology, to work on your physiology, and you've already mentioned a bit that your mentor told you just put yourself into the right frame of mind, into the situation. So physiology is related to the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Tone of voice and the words. Can you work on that? Can you learn it? Can you adopt it? Can you be more effective with them?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of being a leadership coach and a speaking coach means that we help people in doing that type of thing anyway, so they can learn how that they're coming across, because a lot of people don't actually realize how they're being perceived by other people. And the reality is, perception is reality. You could be the nicest person on the planet, but if you come across and you're scowling and you've got a wrong kind of voice, etc., it's very harsh, and you kind of really emphasize the wrong parts of your words, people aren't really going to be able to gel with you. They'll think, oh, what on earth are you? I'm a bit scared. Whereas you might not realize that that's actually how you're coming across. So first of all, it's kind of looking at actually how do you perform? What are the bad habits that you've got yourself into? Do you stand with a hand in a pocket all the time? Or maybe you've got your hands behind your back. And it's really interesting, actually. It's really crazy stuff, because I've been involved with so many different organizations and dealing with so many different things around like sales and marketing. And I think that salesmen, for me, are the most fascinating breed of people sometimes, because you go into some kind of negotiation and you've spent the time with your client, and you've understood what it is that they're looking for, and then you kind of put your proposal together. Yeah. And what you quickly do is you go into the meeting with the client, and what does most salesmen do? Here you go. And then they sit back as far as they can in the room with their arms like this. Yeah? Scared witless at what the client's going to say next. What's that saying about your proposal? What's that saying about what's in here, kind of thing? It's crazy. You're saying that you're scared of it. You're scared of the content. You've got no confidence in it. Whereas the reality is, if actually you go into like some of these situations and you've understood that actually that's not the right way of doing it. The really way you want to do it is you turn your document around, you present it to somebody so they can read it straight away. You hand it to them. You sit there at the table. Your hands are visible, so you're completely trustworthy. You're not a magician or anything where you're being untrustworthy. And you sit forward, you sit upright, you be attentive to them. Straight away, you mean business. Yeah. And that's before a single word comes out of your mouth. Yeah. And so yeah, it's fascinating when you start actually looking and examining what people are doing and starting to read their physiologies and everything. So I think the first thing is really just understand what you do. Really watch what you do when you go into these kind of situations, and come back away and evaluate yourself. It's a book that I was given when I was about 18, actually, I think, was by Dale Carnegie, the How to Win Friends and Influence People. One of the key messages in that book is every day, when you get home on a night, one of the things you should be doing is saying, what did I do today really well that I need to replicate and do every day to become more successful? And what did I do today that I could do better at? And how can I improve that going forwards? And I think as you start to use that sort of self-examination type of process on what you're doing with your interactions and your communications and everything, you'll suddenly start to feel you get better anyway. Then when you start to learn more about human physiology and how you read like the signs of what people are doing, and then about tonality and about like the gestures and movement and about what kind of words you're choosing, etc. All of a sudden, because you're now hyper aware of all these things, you start to use them naturally anyway. It's a bit like you know the example, you know, a bit like when you go out and you buy a red car or something, and all of a sudden everyone's driving red cars. Where the hell did all the red cars come from? And it's nothing to do with that. It's just you've become hypersensitive to red cars at that point in time. Yeah. So the same thing with it, as you start to learn to read other people and read yourself, you become hypersensitive to it, and you can therefore start to mimic the traits that you want to. But it does take time, it takes work, and you just have to persevere in it. And you will make mistakes. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Martin, you've mentioned there, you know, obviously about that aspect of that can build it up, can learn. A lot of people just say, "Oh, it's difficult." You know, I've been doing it one way, and it's just, you know, never helped me, and they're hardly trying to actually work on the communication skills. Firstly, I think because you know, it's obviously the habit. But secondly, it's one of those things that we do accept as a definition of communication is communicating with other person. However, you've just shown a book beat the statistics, right?
Sorry, yeah.
By the way, just if you can just show it. So that's Martin's award-winning book. So well done, Martin, for that, because stats are something really important, and one of my favorite one is probably that 20% of communication is between you and somebody else, and everything, so 80% is internal communication. Now, obviously, with internal communication, it's difficult to hear your tone of voice, or the words just appear as the thoughts. However, it's quickly prompted by the physiology you have. So coming back to what we discussed so far and that aspect now of internal communication. So is it important to work on that as well? Is there a tool or strategy that you can use to work on your internal communication that you can suggest?
Yeah, there's lots and lots, and working on your internal communication is so crucial. It's queer actually, because you probably say things to yourself, that little voice, that little nagging thing in the back of your mind, that you would never ever say to another human being. And sometimes you come across people that actually do voice these things out loud, and they'll turn around and say, "Oh, I'm stupid. Oh, I can't do this. Oh, I'm no good. Why me?" And all these kind of sayings. And the reality is, many people have been there and had those same thoughts. I've been there and had those same thoughts back in the day. But how much does that really help you? Just sat there, just wallowing in self-pity, having your own little pity party. It's great, absolutely. How many friends do you have at that? You, me, myself, and I, is it? Anyway. So you have to kind of learn that if you wouldn't speak to somebody else like that, why would you speak to yourself like that? Why would you really belittle yourself? Why would you give yourself so little self-respect? If you were sat down with a friend who's having an issue, the last thing you'd be saying is, you're useless, you're no good. It always happens to you. You'd be sitting down saying, okay, well, how can we solve this? What can we do even better? So you need to become your own best coach. You need to be asking those power questions. What is it you can do? How can you do it? Where can you get the answers from? Who can you contact? All those kind of real power things that kind of move you forwards and get your brain in gear. Because if you've read the Stephen Peters book, The Chimp Paradox, and he talks about the whole idea of the monkey mind versus the more developed human mind, your monkey mind just works so quickly, incredibly quickly. I mean, literally lightning reflexes. That's exactly where it comes from, because it's instinctive. So whenever something boils up into you, or you feel yourself getting anger, stress, panicked, all those kind of emotional feelings, they're coming from that monkey mind and limbic system. That's what's driving you forwards. Whereas by asking yourself a question, you're engaging your slower human mind, and your rational thought can then kick in, and that's the thing that will then take you into a new pattern and move you forwards. And then straight away, the more you do it, you build up more and more neural pathways. You reinforce the melanin linings between all the different receptors. So straight away, you're in a position where the more you start asking yourself better questions when you're in those situations, the easier it becomes. So you may start off today and thinking, okay, I'll spend 10 out of my 12 hours talking myself into being a complete idiot. Tomorrow I'm only going to do 10 of those hours because I'm going to stop myself. I'm going to make sure I ask myself a good question. And then the following day you may only do 8 hours, and the following day you may only do 6 hours, and the following day you may do 4 hours. And all of a sudden you'll wake up one day and suddenly think something will happen to you. And it's not a case of, oh, why me? Or oh, I'm so rubbish or anything. Straight away you say, this is how I'm going to work the problem. This is how I'm going to find the solution. This is where I'm going to move forward. It actually doesn't really matter that much. I'm still alive, still breathing, and I still have food on the table. Everything's all good. And you just put yourself into a much more positive way of working. The more positive you become, then the more positive you just become.
Well, one of my favorite quotes is the quality of your communication reflects the quality of your life. And before we actually start communicating with other people, it's as you mentioned, how we wake up. So we wake up and we either decide, because the internal communication is quite a lot of times a decision, isn't it? And we choose, or we decide, I should even say, to stick to something that is comfortable, not necessarily good for us.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, that monkey from in Paradox, always is so sharp and so quick with response. So it just picks the easiest option. And the internal communication starts from the moment you wake up and how you perceive. We spoke about perception, how you perceive your day, but most importantly, how you perceive yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then that will also reflect how others perceive you. So if you had to choose one thing to be used as a tool in the morning when you wake up to approach your day better, to approach yourself better with communication, what would that be?
Okay, so you need to build a habit, basically, because it's very easy to talk yourself out of doing things, because naturally, the natural law of things want to be lazy. There's a reason why a sphere is the most basic shape in the entire world. It's because matter and particles and everything else just wants to be lazy. It will naturally just attract itself into a sphere. Raindrops are spheres, planets are spheres. Naturally things go into curves and spheres. So if you don't want to naturally fall into kind of a pattern of, well, I'll have an extra 10 minutes in bed, or, oh, can't be bothered doing that today, or, no, I'm not going to go to the gym or anything, then you need to build yourself a different habit. And that habit needs to be one that kind of gets you up and gets you moving. So for me, my habit is really simple. The alarm clock goes off. I crawl out of bed looking like something out of the primordial soup, I'm pretty sure. I kind of get myself to the bathroom. I climb up into the sink, it feels. I'm pretty sure this is not physically happening, but that's what it feels like. And I brush my teeth. And as soon as I'm brushing my teeth, I smile at myself and I give myself a good morning. Right? And it's going to be a great day. And from that moment on, it is.
Well, it's a bit of an affirmation, isn't it? So affirmation will be one of the tools you can use to get the correct communication to the real yourself, not to the monkey. Let's just put it this way. Martin, it's been a wonderful interview. And the one and the last question I really wanted to ask you, and it's been just going through of everything you just said so far, because it's so powerful, and it doesn't matter if it's that external aspect of communication or internal. Does the right skill of communication, which you already said, it can be learnable, and that's one of the main reasons that we also believe. So Marek and I, we also believe that you can teach and you can learn that skill. That's why 22nd of March, we're going to be delivering the workshop about power of communication. So one of the most important things about having the right communication, it builds your confidence. You become more courageous. You're not scared of sort of encounter an entire world, and your ability to move forward and to accept any challenge just increases massively. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, I think communication is definitely one of those key skills that'll help you in that journey beyond a measure of a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Martin, I'm so grateful for your time and for the opportunity to go through this important subject in everyone's life. And I'm hoping the message, the way I've received it, people who are live on this video and who will be listening as a record will also take the values out of that, and important values, because as you mentioned about the stories before, every story has its value. Every communication has its values, because when you use them skills correctly, you actually gain a lot of knowledge and experience. So this was most certainly a life-changing experience for myself. So Martin, thank you so much again for your time. And I just want to say I'm honored to be able to have you on today's interview.
It's been a pleasure, Norik, as always. You never disappoint. It's always good fun working with you.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I look forward to our next chapter.
Certainly will. And yes, if there's any questions or anything that do come out of this, if they haven't already been asked, then please feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than welcome to answer questions or anything.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, Martin Sharp, thank you so much. Have a lovely evening.
You too. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.